of the plastic pitch. Steve, welcome again, my friend.
Hi, how are you doing?
I couldn't be better after that performance last night, Steve. Let me tell you, watching with my two sons, we were all smiles. We couldn't believe that Canada was up against one of the top world nations, and we're going toe-to-toe for the most part. And a guy who I've got to give a lot of respect, who I haven't given to in a long time, Toussaint Ricketts, and another guy, Nick Ledgerwood, actually played a real good game. Let's talk about that non-call that took place early on against Ricketts. I thought that was a PK. Did you?
I thought it was a PK. I thought the ref was out of position, Juan Guzman, but I think he was out of position on a lot of calls. At the same time, though, I didn't think the Colombian first goal was offside, so maybe it comes out in the wash. Maybe it should have been 1-1 at that point and not 0-0, but I liked a lot of what Ricketts did. It was a thankless job to have to run against the Colombian backline by himself. And I think he did a pretty admirable job in terms of getting the ball up the field and making some good decisions.
What did we learn last night, Steve, aside from, the regulars that have been out there time and time again? We talked about Ricketts, Ledgerwood, Julian de Guzman, David Egder, two of the leaders on the pitch. But what else did we learn about this squad that we haven't learned up until last night?
Well, I think what we have learned is maybe psychologically the core group of guys who were there for the 8-1 might be over it. I think that's the kind of loss that hangs over a program for a long time, what happened in Honduras. And I think that's the kind of game that showed that psychologically these guys are over it. They're looking at everything as a fresh start. And I think we're starting to see that idea, if there'd be a hangover, if some of these guys would ever be able to really contribute to Canada again, that they can. And I think this was an important step. I think, beating Jamaica at home is one thing, but being able to go toe-to-toe with guys like James Rodriguez and Falcao and Cuadrado, who I actually thought was Colombia's best player last night, to actually go up against those guys and do that as well as Canada did and frustrate them for as long as they did, I think it shows that there is the hangover now, and I think we're looking forward instead of back.
And I'll tell you what I learned last night, Steve. There should be no more debate, none whatsoever, about Canada looking for their starting keeper. We found them in the last two games against Jamaica, now against Colombia. Milan Borjan has been outstanding. He is the real deal. Agree or not?
I think so. I mean, it's always good. You want to have people pushing him. You don't. I never like saying to a keeper that you're the guy, you're going to go, because you always want this guy to be pushed. So I don't want to coronate him or crown him, but I do think he was very good. The save on the free kick from Rodriguez was excellent. Did a lot of other little things right. I mean, there was the one mix-up between the defenders and him that led to a chance later in the game where it was a bit of a dumpster fire in the back. But at the same time, I think he's done well enough. And really, it's hard to pick out a Canadian player that maybe you would say really underperformed, because in a game like that, even if you have one player who's off, you're going to get exploited. And I think Colombia really struggled to find those holes.
Steve, we've always struggled in putting the ball in the back of the net in this country, going way, way, way back. The midfield has always been, I would think, one of our strongest suits. Defending has been okay. Goalkeeping has been okay as well. But putting the ball in the back of the net, we've struggled. And I think this squad misses Lucas Cavallini. But then again, if there's an issue there that we don't know about, we've got to move on as a country and say to ourselves, can Kyle Larin do it? I believe he can with a lot more time. Can Jordan Hamilton do it? Is there someone else out there that could possibly do it? I know one kid, and I would call consistently, day in and day out, for Canada to have him come and represent this country. Mark Cristante, the former AC Milan product, now with Benfica. Your thoughts, Steve?
Well, I think first with Kyle Larin, I agree. I see so much there. I just worry that he's going to come out of UConn and go to an MLS program and sit on the bench or go play in the USL and get lost. And I think that's been the case for so many Canadian players in the past. And especially strikers. Strikers have to play. They need to be informed. Their timing needs to be right on. And they need to be playing at a high level. And I think, you look back at maybe what was the last Canadian team where you say, wow, we had weapons who could score, at least in CONCACAF any time. And you probably have to go back to the mid-'90s when it was Pescasolido, Bunbury, and Radzinski. But all those guys were playing on European teams and starting every week. And that's such a massive difference when those guys can slot in. And whether it be MLS, whether it be NASL, whether it be somewhere in Europe, whatever Kyle Larin does outside of UConn, he needs to be playing and not whittling away in a reserve team. And that's what sort of terrifies me with young Canadian players who are coming out of school. And again, we could go into the long rigmarole about Canadians domestics and what places there are and what pressures there are in Canadian teams to play these guys. But that's what really scares me. I think he's got a lot of talent, but he's got to play. When he gets out of school, he's got to go to an environment where he's playing every week.
Steve, I saw LaPerriere for the first time last night, the midfielder. He's a young, big, strapping young man. I think this is the type of player you need more in that midfield. Could he be a guy that could do a lot of the dirty work, as they say, the grinding it out that we need getting ready for the World Cup qualifier for Russia?
Well, I definitely think so because, we're still struggling to find that heir apparent to Julian de Guzman, who is still, in his, into his 30s, and we're still looking for that guy to be his apprentice, to come up and work and learn from him. And I think he might be the player. Montreal's put some faith into him. He's been getting some playing time. He's not really just been thrown in there for the sake of a PR signing, which might be the case from the other Montreal Impact players they brought up from the academy. He's getting some useful minutes. And again, it goes back to being able to play. And if he's playing in MLS, if he's playing for meaningful games, then he's going to be a benefit to the national team. And I think that's the position that Canada's always had in fairly good stead, is the holding areas. You again, going back to what we were talking about just a second ago, it's the attacking areas always concern you with Canada. But I thought that I saw enough, and I've seen enough from him to think he deserves more caps going forward. And let's see him in Panama.
Steve, just before we let you go, in the last couple of minutes, I was disappointed. The only part I was disappointed to last night was not seeing a guy who you have seen day in and day out, Hansen Bokai, and another youngster who I've followed his career since he was 15 years old, maybe 14, I should say, and that is Luca Gasparotto. I would have loved to see these two young fellows get in. If this is the case that Benito Floro continues to bring these youngsters in, as we saw Manny Aparicio and Jordan Hamilton get game experience under their belt, I think this is a wise thing, getting ready, preparing for the Gold Cup and then qualifiers. Do you agree that these young men need to get the experience now ahead of guys like maybe a Pacheco, maybe guys of his ilk?
I think in the case of Hansen, they have to bring him in and at least to be in camp to see the sort of tactical systems. I know that Floro is working a lot on off-the-ball positioning, defensive responsibilities. You want to bring that young player in to understand how Floro wants Canada to play. Whether Hansen got any minutes or not last night, I don't think it's that big a deal because he's just 17. His 18th birthday is at the end of the month. But at the same time, I think they've identified him as a key player going forward, and now is the time to start bringing him in to understand what Floro sees for the future of this team. Because I think the fact that even at 17 he got called into the squad is a big sign of exactly how high everyone is on this kid. He's got a lot of filling out to do, and he's got a lot of learning still left to do. But his upside is so big that you're right. I see him every week, so obviously I have a lot of time for Hansen. He's a guy that I personally cheer for to succeed. His story is wonderful about coming to Canada from Africa, from some very, very bad circumstances, and really making something of his life. And I think it speaks a lot to his family, to the coaches he's had in Edmonton, and to his determination to work. So there's still a lot of chapters to be left for Hansen. And again, with Gasparotto as well, it's a case of having to bring these guys in, get them into the system, have that first look to see exactly how they're going to fit. There's going to be plenty of time to get these guys into games, but I do think sooner or later, before Gold Cup next year, these players are going to have to see some minutes.
Absolutely.
In a game.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Steve Sandor of the Plastic Pitch, we thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. What's up right now at the Plastic Pitch, and where can people follow you on Twitter as we let you go?
The Twitter, you can follow the11.ca, and Plastic Pitch you can get through any iOS and or Google Play, Amazon. Get it as a digital tablet magazine. And looking forward to our third issues out, and looking forward to issue 4 for the winter.
Outstanding. Steve, thanks.